Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Relationship Talks. I'm your host, Laurie Brooke, and together we will get to take a look at what goes on behind closed doors. Today, I am joined by Chris Lake.
Hi, I'm Chris Lake, and I'm here to talk about how to help your toddler meet their milestones, effective parenting, and positive parenting with Laurie Brooke.
Chris Lake is the author of the upcoming book, How to Help Your Toddler Meet Their Milestones, 101 Developmental Behaviour Hacks. He is a native New Yorker who has been working with children with developmental delays across the past 2 decades. He got his master's in both general and special education in 2012, and in 2014 he started a non-profit to initially advocate for children with lead poisoning. This non-profit is known as Community for a Cause and has successfully worked to aid New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs as well as people abroad. In looking to expand his ability to provide for families of children with autism, he wrote his book, How to Help Your Toddler Meet Their Milestones, 101 Developmental Behaviour Hacks to give families and providers a time-tested blueprint of how to develop children using evidence-based practice. Welcome, Chris, and thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had a lovely day. It's afternoon your time.
I sure did. Thank you so much for making the time. An early morning for me. I really do appreciate it. Glad to be here with a relationship architect.
It is quite early here, but the sun is shining, so it looks like a beautiful day. We've had lots of rain clouds lately, so a nice sunny day is what we like, letting the land dry out. So, Chris, we're here to talk about parenting, and I suppose that dreaded age as parents, and we're talking about toddlers and the tantrums and everything else that they tend to throw at us. I feel for me, it's that age where they don't have a great concept of words. They can't really communicate what they're going through. And they also don't understand the feelings and the emotions that are going on inside. And so they often lash out and they're having these big tantrums, and often they're quite public. And you feel like the whole world's looking at you. So how did you get started in all of this work?
So oddly enough, I had no intention of working with toddlers in my entire life, despite the fact I worked with kids most of my life. My original plan was to do something along the lines of CBT therapy with depression before CBT was a thing. Right. I um, I personally suffered with depression in my youth, and I felt when I went to therapists, while every now and then a therapist would introduce one new question that I had not asked myself, and that was what I found useful. For the most part, I felt somewhat dissatisfied. I felt like something is missing. There's homework I feel like you should be giving me. That's what I always felt like. I felt like you should be telling me what I can work on as opposed to just hearing me out. And I appreciate that they gave a platform, and that is very helpful for millions and millions of people. And I don't discredit that. However, me personally, I had a separate vision. Regardless, in my experimental psych class, we learned how to work with mice and do basically ABA practice, applied behavior analysis, where you take data, you graph it, you can analyze it, and you can predictably change and modify behaviors. Our goal was to modify the behavior of mouse to use a little water fountain, air quotes, on request. And at the end of the class, my teacher stood up and said, if anyone has enjoyed this and wants to put this into practice, there's an opportunity working with kids with autism in this part of Brooklyn. And the rest is history. I took them up on the opportunity because I had nothing else going for me at that time. And I like kids. Kids tend to like me. And working there, I found an immediate bond. I found an immediate connection with the kids. The kids found a connection with me. They offered me a job as opposed to a volunteer position very quickly. And I found that this was calling me more and more. And I've been doing that for the last 16 years, primarily with kids who are 2 or 3 years old. I have worked with kids as old as 15 years old, helping them to modify their behavior so they reach their milestones or let go of behavior that doesn't suit them, what we would call non-functional behavior, sometimes aggressive behavior. And it's such an honor. It's such a pleasure. It's something that I really get a lot of delight out of. People say you don't work a day in your life when you do something you love. That's false because your body still feels it. But I can say this much: I go to sleep with great peace and I wake up with great peace. I love what I do.
That's amazing, and an amazing journey to get you where you are.
Thank you. And it's funny because so for 16 years I've been working with toddlers and aiding parents as well, having conversations with parents when they came to a clinic. Or if I was working in the home doing one-on-one behavior with a child, I would give parents certain advice and like, here's something you can tweak, here's something you can do. Because I kept noticing over and over again that while I grew in my discipline, I grew in my field and my capability, this glaring oversight kept being exposed to me, and that was the parents were left out of the equation for the most part. In America, the early intervention system here, specifically in New York, they include the parents in designing what program they want for their kids. They say, what do you want your child to be doing? Because you want to respect the culture of your household, et cetera, which is a great way to give the parents ownership of what's happening with their kids. But outside of that initial step, and conversations that help the parent along the way of what to do next. Okay, the child's starting to age out, they're hitting 3, so here's what you may need to do next, here's what you can do next, here's other services, etc. Or if you want to change a service provider. But in terms of, hey, mom, dad, here's something that you personally can do that'll make mealtime easier. Here's something that you can do that'll make tantrum management easier. Here's something that you can do that'll help your child develop X, Y, and Z. And I didn't see enough of that. And my concern grew because I realized seeing with myself, or when I eventually grew in my career and had staff, and I saw it with staff members, kids would respond to myself or other providers, but then they wouldn't do the same for the parents. Or a different kid in therapy than they were at home. And it made me ask the question, well, what is it worth? Because while we have this child, and after they turn 3, they're going to go back home and live with their kid. Is it going to stick? Does it stick? And I've seen kids years later, some kids I've seen years later, and they regressed fully. Some kids I've seen years later, and academic aspects stick, reading, writing, arithmetic, those things stick. But in particular, emotional control and impulse control and aggression, those 3 in particular, those tend to be consistent regardless of how old the child gets. And that's mostly in part, and I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just trying to illuminate, disclaimer, it's mostly because the child is exposed to the similar responses to their behavior, right? So as a behavior therapist, our career is based on being able to prove what we're doing is working, because we have to chart and graph all the data, but also it's to look at things from a behavioral point of view. All behavior, and this goes across any kids, toddlers, tweens, teenagers, adults, elderly, all behavior continues as long as it's useful. If a child learns a behavior is useful, they will continue that behavior. They're not concerned with good or bad. It's not a matter of manipulation or morality, or it's simply useful. And when the child, as you said, the child is still developing. The brain is developing about 80% to the age of 3. And then the brain fully develops in our mid 20s, not in our teens as we once may have thought. But for women, it usually finishes about 24. And for guys, because we're kind of dumb, we need an extra 2 years and the brain finishes baking at 26. But that 0 to 3 phase, you have a lot of time where you can put information, behavior, character traits, knowledge into a child's head. And there are windows. There are certain windows where it's just easier to get a child to pick something up. And if you miss that window, you didn't fail. It's not all over. It's just that, because I know there's a lot of parent guilt, there's mom guilt, there's dad guilt. And it's tricky. And we could talk about that a little later too, because I love addressing that issue. But it's important to recognize, we're all learning, and there is no blueprint, unfortunately. But it is important to recognize that if you don't take advantage of the opportunities at the first chance, you will have another chance. It's just lost time. That's all. And in that lost time, you're going to deal with some frustration, both you and the child. And my goal personally is to help parents avoid that. My goal is to help parents avoid the frustration and also give parents confidence. I love seeing parents more confident. Like I can raise my child. My child is something I can manage now, as opposed to what do I do? Hands up and that lost look on their face. So, yeah, great question. Thank you.
You do kind of feel more confident, don't you, when you can avoid having that meltdown, or when you can successfully, navigate your way through a certain situation and you've achieved the outcome at the end. You kind of feel like, yeah, I did that. I got that.
Right.
And I
Right.
didn't have to have the meltdown. I didn't have to have the explosion and all of that. And so as a parent, it does kind of make you feel a little bit more, puffed out chest and just, yes, I've kind of got this thing down pat.
And listen, that's one of the best feelings as a human, feeling like a capable parent,
Yes.
because the alternative hurts. And we all face it. Anyone who's listening with kids, you're not alone if you feel at any moment, at any age, I don't feel that capable. And it's not easy to admit. You don't want to share that with your friends, family, maybe therapists. But but that's all of us. That's all of us, and that was all of our parents too. We made our parents feel incapable on many a day across the ages, and that's kind of just the rub of human relationships. Kids aren't supposed to be predictable, and even for me, being a child development expert, having a 2-year-old right now, she's 26 months old right now, napping right behind me in the other room. And while I am well equipped to deal with a great deal of her behaviors, there's still a good amount that I come across it. Well, that's new, and now I have to figure out what to do with this. And the one in particular that I didn't see coming, I knew I couldn't factor for sleep deprivation. Like I knew going into being a new dad, I said, Chris, the one thing you will not be able to factor for is how you will respond to X, Y, and Z when you are sleep deprived. And that was true. And I feel like I did fairly well. Baby's still here, mom and dad are still pretty happy, etc. But parent rejection was one that I had never heard about, didn't know about. And that was definitely a tender spot for me as someone who was so excited to be a parent and work with kids so long. I was like, nope, you dad stay over there, mom, let's go. I was like, all right, I guess I'll play support. I'll be husband as opposed to dad, and play what role I need to play right now. But kids are always going to throw curveballs at you. It's on us to be flexible, and to have a little bit of humor,
Yes.
facing whatever a kid could throw at us, because they're not doing it at a certain age. They're really not doing it just to push up buttons. They're just doing it because it's useful. And big takeaway for anyone hearing this, saying, "Oh, how do I deal with my tantrum toddler? I want to untangle the terrible twos is my goal." Um, Recognize what your child recognizes as useful. Really pay attention to that, because they key in. If they recognize that by screaming every night, you are going to pick them up from the crib, put them in the bed, and let them sleep in the bed, even though you really want them to sleep in their own crib, they have learned that is useful. If you're at the store and they really want the M&Ms or the candy or whatever little treat is perfectly at eye level for them, and you just want to leave and you're so tired and you got to get dinner ready and all this things happening, and they have a full-blown next level Mach 5 ear-blown pitch meltdown, and you say, fine, we'll get it. Let's just go. That was useful. The child has learned that was useful. Now, the rub, and this is the tricky part, and I tell parents this and I've told parents this for years, when you aim to break these habits, it's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be a silver bullet one-off where, okay, if I do this one thing I heard this guy, Chris Lake, talk about on the Relationship Architects podcast, then all problems are solved and it's rainbows and sunshine. It doesn't work that way. We don't work that way, right? We can want to learn something, even when we want to learn something. Think about times that you have pursued something you want to learn. Did you learn it on the first go? The answer is probably no. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes repetition. Same with a child. You're trying to teach something you don't want to learn. So that being said, in order for a child to stop tantruming, you as a parent need to recognize what are they trying to get out of this, right? Obviously, sometimes the kid wants attention. If the kid wants attention, then it's your job to teach them a better method of communicating to receive attention, because they're craving connection. That's important. You might not feel you have the time for it, but you might be wrong. You might be incorrect that now it's more important to scroll on Instagram than it is to sit down with your kid and read a story or just watch them play, whatever it is they're doing. And that could be a humbling moment to say, yeah, maybe I am wrong about that. Okay, let me step up a little bit here. Just give my kid the time of day. But if it's for something, if they want access to something, if they want to gain the iPad, or they want your phone, or they want a treat, or they want a toy, and they're going about it in a way that's just explosively wrong, what I tell every parent to do first is to take a very deep breath. Very deep breath. So you can calm yourself down first, because if you don't put yourself in a calm place, it's going to be very difficult to put someone else in a calm place. And that's a very serious technique to recognize. You're not going to shout someone to being calm.
We're just going to take a quick break now, so don't go anywhere. Make sure you stick around and join us for the rest of our conversation. If you haven't already, make sure you grab a copy of my ebook, It's Time to Stop the Overwhelm, giving you practical and actionable tips that you can implement right away to create happier and healthier relationships.
Telling someone to calm down has worked 0 out of a million times for my recognition. But if you're
have you ever tried it with your wife?
One would say I know better. My wife might say I don't. thankfully, my wife is exceptionally mellow and even keel. So I don't have to, luckily, run into such a scenario. But God love her. But with kids, and just so everyone recognizes, my Monday through Friday is screaming, biting, kicking, scratching, pinching autistic toddlers. So I have to calm down quite a few children every single day. And I've done this across hundreds of kids. And I promise you, if you are not as calm as you can be, it will be more difficult. More difficult. You can traumatize a kid into being calm. I don't advise that. That has effects later. So if you go into a shouting match to exert your dominance as an adult, like just you know what, enough, and you want the kids just you know pipe down, they might do that. However, you also taught them something. You've taught them that if I want someone to be quiet, I just have to be the loudest person in the room. And they will take that on to another environment. You might not see that. They might take it to the playground. They might take it to daycare. They might take it to their relationships when they're a teenager, 20
Mm.
something, 30 something. You might not see that. So just recognize everything we do for a child is also a bit of a model for what is normal and acceptable, including how we shut down our children, including how we redirect our children. So be aware of that. I'm not saying be perfect, but just it's good to be aware.
Yeah. And I think
So,
this, you made a really important point there, Chris, too, is that it's all in the way that we're communicating with them and our interactions, our words, our tone. That's all part and parcel of how we're communicating. And that is what we're teaching our children from this very young age, whether we want to, whether we've seen it that way or not.
right.
And that method of communication is what they're going to use as they get older.
Right, exactly. 100%. 100%. They are sponges for how to be. They are recording every adult up to about the age of 7 apparently. Kids don't fully have that internal monologue that we have, the internal dialogue. They're still developing that. Before that age, you're simply looking at models for how do I be? How do I respond? How do I get what I want? So if they notice their parents fight to manipulate each other, they're picking up on that. Oh, daddy did that to mommy and daddy got what daddy wanted. That was useful. Now I'm gonna try that. Oh, mommy did that to daddy and mommy got what she wanted. That was useful. We don't think about these things, but they're watching or listening and they're paying attention. But to go back to if a child wants to see an iPad or something they don't want, you take a deep breath and then you wait. Because when a child's in a tantrum, what's happening neurologically in their brain is that their amygdala might have taken over. And if that part of the brain is taken over, that's in charge of hormones and emotions. They are literally out of control, literally. And if you tell them what you want them to do, you want them to do, da, 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 they are not processing that. They simply aren't able. They have a 2-year-old brain. They have a 2-year-old brain. I say take a deep breath, look at them with loving, compassionate eyes, and wait. Wait a moment. And as you see, there'll be a break. It won't take too long, but there'll be a break in the tears for like just a bit. And at that point, they say, hi, thank you for calming down. Praise them for calming down. You would be shocked at how valuable it is to a child to tell them what capabilities they have that they did not know they have. And one thing children, young children especially, don't know they have is the ability to calm themselves down. Now, when we as adults label this for them, say, "Oh, look at you! You calmed yourself down like a big boy. You calmed yourself down like a big girl. Very nice." It sparks a new brain wrinkle in their head that says, "Wait, I can do. I can calm myself down. Oh, that's good. And that's a good thing. I got praise for. I got a compliment for that. Mom's giving me a hug now. That's great." After you give the child praise for calming themselves down, you can either state the rules or reinstate the rules. And this is something so valuable for a lot of parents to really consider. There is almost no age that's too early to give a child rules. And it's not a conversation that I find parents have in households with the parents that I've spoken to, because I usually will ask startup questions when I have a new parent coming to my clinic or if I'm working with them. I want to say, hey, so what rules do you have for your child in the household? And I'll tell you, Lori, out of let's say in the last school year, from January till now, out of all the parents I've asked that question to, zero have had any rules. I'm sorry, not zero. None have had any rules. There have been not a single parent I've asked, what rules do you have for your 2-year-old who is drawing on the walls or who is hitting your 1-year-old baby or who's X, Y, and Z? What rules do they have? They always balk and say, rules. I'm like, yes, you can set rules for your 2-year-old. That's allowed. That's not too much. It won't break their brain. That's not abuse. You're allowed, you're the adult, you're the authority in the house. That is your role. In my book, I call it the discipline of parenting. You're required to establish a disciplinary pattern for them. Not disciplinary in the sense of punitive, but the sense that a child will start to develop. I have a discipline. I can be disciplined in certain ways. I can follow rules. I can meet expectations. There are expectations. I can meet them, and that's good. And that's good. And you want to make sure it's good. You want to catch your kid being good. So a lot of people are raised, I'll speak particularly in New York, people that I know, people of color in particular, were raised in a very punitive fashion. So it was a very, it's my way or the highway. There's capital corporal punishment, not capital punishment, that would be problematic to say the least.
Yeah.
Corporal punishment, spankings, etc. And again, the children's learning that it's okay to use physical means to show someone when they're wrong. They translate in different ways that affects their self-esteem. But what's more is that when a child was doing what is expected, it was taken for granted. So as opposed to when a child's not doing what's expected and the parent gets loud. There's three things I find kids, almost all kids, I'll say until they're in their late teens, if not mid-20s, to be honest, kids love. And you can see it based on what they watch on TV and media, video games, etc. They like speed, they like volume, they like energy. Doesn't really matter why, like what the source is, what the reasoning is. If they've looked at one stimuli versus another stimuli, and one stimuli has more volume, more speed, more energy, they're going to enjoy that stimuli. They want to see cars crash into them, blow up. They play video games where there's a lot of military action. Books are boring. Going to nature, going to walk. That's boring. Is it boring or is it peaceful? Maybe it's peaceful. Maybe we can learn about how good peace is. And then when we get older, like, oh God, give me that peace.
Yes.
So why I'm saying this is because when we get upset at a child is when we're at our most interesting for a child. If we were to come home and see the child has torn apart the kitchen, there's flour everywhere and there's a mess and they're eating off the ground, our eyes are going to get bigger than they usually are. There might be a throbbing vein in our neck and we're going to shout with our jaw, this Cro-Magnon face, "What's wrong with you?" And they'll be like, even though they know they're in trouble, that was still very stimulating. And that high level of stimulation, regardless of the consequences, is going to trigger some dopamine. And at the end of all of it, we all seek dopamine wherever we can get it. It makes us feel good. And a lot of stimulation gives kids dopamine. And when we're shouting at them, we're upset, they might not register like, I can't do this again, that was bad. They're going to register, that was interesting. That was kind of funny. I like that. I have this power over mom and dad that I didn't know. You see it even more when kids get older, when they hit like 8, 9, 10, 11, depending on when, and they start cursing more openly, I should say, right at this time. And they realize, oh, if I say this word, mom, that really flips the switch on mom. Oh, if I say this word, I might do this thing. And that's just so much more interesting than our typical responses to good behavior. If they get an A, the kid brings home an A, like, oh, good job, Junior, way to big. That's boring. If they bring home an F, like, what's wrong with you? I can't believe it. You're grounded for 3 weeks. That's a more interesting interaction. It's a bad interaction, but it's more interesting. So it's on us as this new generation of positive parenting, conscious parenting parents to fake it a little bit until it becomes natural. Fake it until you make it, right? Fake the positivity. And some people say, oh, you don't need to do it forever. It's not that painful. And the use is so tantamount. Like I tell people, just get over it. because the value, there's so much value in there. It's not about being inauthentic. It's about creating a relationship with your kid. And if you can create a relationship with your kid that's based on positivity, it's I think it's okay to be a little fake and be like, wow, what a great drawing you made. I love the colors you use. That's so creative, as opposed to, oh yeah, that's great, let's put in the fridge. That's boring. Like get loud, get animated, be a little goofy, be a little silly in response to a kid, depending on what age they are. So it pairs with what's really going to be vibe with them. But the more animated you are, the more volume you use for good things, the more likely they are to do good things. Kids will continue to do things as long as it's useful. Getting a lot of energy and stimulation from the parents for doing something good is useful. Getting a very blah, neutral, gray response for doing what is expected, for doing something good, for doing something unexpected that's good, is not reinforcing. They're not going to want to do it again. They might do it because they have to if they're in a household where they have to. But the second an expectation is dropped, they'll drop it too. Versus if you use a lot of positive, warm, bubbly, voluminous language and colorful language to praise your child, even after that child's out of the house, their brain has now been set up to say it's good to do the dishes the night before I go to bed. It's good to have a clean house. It's good to do my homework in a timely manner when I go to college. It's good to fill in the blank,
Yep.
fill in the blank.
I really love that point there because I think a lot of us have heard the concept of, giving praise. If you praise the correct behavior as opposed to getting mad at the incorrect behavior.
Right.
But I've never actually heard it explained the way that you've just done it, Chris, and that is in terms of being animated about it so that they actually see and link and
Right.
want to actually repeat that behavior to get that same reaction.
So important. So I tell my staff this all the time. My staff's fantastic. I'm so grateful for the staff I work with. And I've worked with staffs in the past where I'm like, listen, you gotta like I asked them, tap into your silly goofy. When I first meet someone, I say, who's your favorite goofy comedian? Specifically goofy comedian, because there's different comedians who, some can be slick and some can be physical and some are goofy. For me, it's Jim Carrey growing up as an 80s baby and seeing in living color. He was always a very extraordinarily animated character. And I get from a lot of 90s babies and 2000 babies at this point, they'll say Kevin Hart. Yeah. They'll say Kevin Hart. I'm like, okay, go with that. If he's your favorite goofy comedian, tap into that. You don't have to do a comedy special, but you want to be fun. If you're not fun when you're giving therapy to a child, they're forced to sit with you for 2 hours. And you're giving them breaks, but they're forced to sit with an unfun, serious person who just wants them to do a repeated task. It's kind of a nightmare. And there's all sorts of tales that adults with autism will tell about their experience with ABA down the road. And I aim to shield any of the kids I work with from having such a negative experience when they work with my staff because I want them to feel positive. I want them to feel some sense of love, some sense of kindness. I always tell my staff, rule number one is be kind. And with that, you're going to have more of a positive interaction. The more you can make your praise be felt, the more likely your child will want to do it again. And the more often you practice, you don't have to be silly forever. That's the thing. The silliness is just a catch. It's like think of it almost like a courtship. When we're courting a partner, you're not 100% your authentic self. You're mostly, but you're really putting on your best outfit for that first date. You're gonna make yourself look as nice as possible, have some good talking points, and then 6 years later, everyone kind of lets go. And I'll spare people whatever details they can imagine, but we dial it back a bit. That being said, it's the same with the kids. You want to court them into following you as an authority. You want to court them into picking up what you're putting down. If you want rules in your house and the rules need to be followed or else, and the consequence is simply an or else, that's a terrifying way to live. You don't want a lifestyle where you need to do X, Y, and Z or else. And we do have a lot of or else's in life and we don't like it. We just deal with it. But if you teach a child, do this because, do this, and then you get this, it sets up a different framework for the child to understand how to be, their character, and how to look at expectations and look at rules. It is a parent's job to establish character, and that's one way to do that. And just to jump into something quick on the topic of rules, right? Um, there's an easy way for toddlers in particular to set rules, and it's a bit formulaic. And oddly enough, it took me a while to recognize that toddlers are very formulaic in language. Um, and you can see this sometimes in language when they'll overgeneralize certain grammatical rules. You might hear instead of a baby saying, I did this, they might say, I do this. Because they know that like, you throw a D at the end of it, that means past tense, right? So they like formulas. They like formulas. They like consistency. They really do. They like structure. They really do because it helps them know, okay, then I'm safe here. So I can explore these within these boundaries. And so when you are setting rules for a kid, there's two different ways you can set it up. So you can use what's called an if-then statement, where you say, if you drop your toys, then you pick it up. If you make a mess, then we clean it up. If your hands are dirty, then we wash our hands. If we want a snack, then you need to point, wherever your child is at in communication. Otherwise, you can use a first then, same thing. So first we have our dinner, then it's time for bed. First we clean up our toys, and then we have a bedtime story. However you want to phrase it, it allows the child to understand that this is the sequence of events. If you do this, this is the consequence. So that's one way to set things up. Let the child know the good or bad consequences. Don't just let it be the bad consequences, guys. If sometimes it could be like, if you eat all of your dinner, then you can have a little chocolate. I'll do that with my daughter sometimes when she just absolutely refuses to eat anything. How about this, kiddo? I'll break you up the tiniest piece of this chocolate bar if you eat the shrimp. Thank you so much. Here you go. And she'll be like, okay, cool. I know what I'm getting out of this. It's not arbitrary. You're not just asking me to do something for the sake of doing something. And first then gives children a sense of what their timeline looks like, because often we forget kids have no agency, and as they get older they gain some, but little kids can't even leave a room they're in without your permission, right? And people will sometimes joke at kids that I work with, like, oh, you're sad, what do you say, what do you have to be sad about, how hard can your life be? And I tell them, like, listen, bills is not it. That's not the tantamount hardship of humanity, of existence, having bills, having heartache. That's not it. It does affect us. We don't feel good about it. But that child can't go outside for fresh air at any point in any day unless someone takes him outside. Imagine that was your life. That's prison. That's prison. That child can't choose what they're going to eat. That child might be able to choose what they're going to wear. Can't choose when he's going to see, who he's going to see, what the day looks like. So when we give a first then statement and we give that explanation of what the timeline rule is, or the timeline expectation is, it helps alleviate a little bit of anxiety for a child. It helps, and we discount that kids can have anxiety. The anxiety didn't just develop at puberty once we started having hormones that were leading towards relationships and romance. We've had anxiety since the very first day where we're here. And ways that we can communicate help bring down tantrums. So even if you go into a store and you know that they're going to ask for candy, say, first we're going to go to the store, and then when we get home, if you do good listening, then you can have candy. Then you can have, some sort of treat that works for your home culture. And then if they get upset, that's when, as I said earlier, you can reinstate the rule. Once you take a deep breath and they calm down, they say, thank you for calming down. Now, remember, we said first we go to the store, and then when we get home, you get a treat. We're not getting a treat here, sweetheart. And that helps the kid. You'll be surprised. Try this enough times. You'll see a kid look at you and say, oh, that's right. You did say that. You are of your word. And it's critical to be a person of your word to your kids. We don't really realize, we don't put enough stock in that. We think sometimes, like, I don't care, like, we just have to go, I don't have time for this. And whenever you say I don't have time for this, you are invalidating your authenticity in the eyes of your kid. Because the kid might say, but you said we could, or you never said, or consistency is king with kids. If you're like, no, we said that first going to the store, and then when we get home, you get something. No, we said you can be upset. You're allowed to be upset, but we did say this. And on the topic of being upset, sometimes you can tell a child. The kids are allowed to have feelings. My daughter has feelings sometimes when she'll ask for a cracker, for example, and we hand her a cracker, and it splits a piece breaks off, and that just ruined her entire year. And we have to take a deep breath and say, it's okay. You're allowed to be upset. But I've learned to let kids also know that there's a reasonable level of upset, and there's a level of upset that's not so reasonable. And as parents, you're allowed to set that bar. So if your kid decides, like, I'm upset and I'm going to start hitting, and I'm upset, I'm going to throw things on the ground, and say, hey, you can be upset, but not like that. Simple as that. You can be upset, but not like that. We don't make a mess when we're upset. We don't use our hands like that when we're upset. We don't push people. We don't, whatever it may be. You let the child know, not like that, but you're allowed to be upset. Take a minute, let the child be upset, and be like, when you're ready, we can talk. And that will also make them feel more secure in their feelings. They'll feel validated, like, okay, you see me, you see that I'm struggling and having a hard moment, and you're not saying, stop it. You're not simply saying, be quiet. You're not simply saying, calm down. I don't want to calm down. Right now, I'm not calm. Right now, I feel panic, and I'm being told to stop my panicking, which is only making me panic more. And if you get into that feedback loop again, the amygdala might take over, and then you'll have a real tantrum, possibly meltdown, where that's when you feel lost. So be patient with yourself, parents.
Well, it's not easy, but at the same time, when you stop and you think about this from like our own perspective, if we're upset about something and somebody tells us, don't be upset, don't stop being silly or whatever, that just makes us worse. It kind of, we go into those feelings even more. How dare you tell me that? And yet we expect the opposite of our kids.
Right. Who are younger than us and don't have the coping skills or processing mechanisms yet that are developed, that we're still developing ourselves.
Don't go away. I will be right back finishing the conversation just after this. If you are looking for ways to improve, enhance, and take your relationship to the next level, make sure you check out our online program, Improving Your Relationships. Don't stay where you are. Do the work, create your own happiness, and move forward with happier and healthier relationships.
At the end of the day, we just kind of don't want them to bug us as much when they're feeling a certain way, and
Yeah.
we just that's just
It just
honest
makes things
truth.
more difficult.
You just be quiet. I don't really care what's happening. But you can't say that.
So, Chris, before you mentioned that you had a book,
Yes,
tell
yes,
me more about this book.
absolutely. And thank you for asking. It is called Help Your Toddler Meet Their Milestones: 101 Behavior Hacks. And the goal of this book was to essentially give parents of new children a blueprint as to what they can say and do to get their child from a little delayed or maybe having a little struggle or plateau to over the milestone. It dawned on me with my daughter that the work I do with children with autism applies not just to children with autism, it applies to everyone. And I think if she was about 8 or 9 months, and I decided to try to get her to start pointing to requests. And that's one of the first things that a parent could teach that will really help a child understand, ooh, there's a give and take. Because between infancy and toddlerhood, there is this psychological transformation a kid has to make that's very difficult. In infancy, a kid knows, I cry, I get what I want. I need something, I cry. I want something, I cry. I don't like something, I cry. And if I'm not getting attention, I cry. And then someone will swoop in, regardless of what the need is, whether it's milk, formula, warmth, cold, their binky, their favorite doll, whatever it is, someone will
Yeah.
figure it out within a matter of seconds to minutes. um, and then somewhere around 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we start saying, no, that doesn't cut anymore. Now you need to do things. You need to walk. You need to, you need to use a spoon. You need to pick up your toys. You need to play with toys like this. And a child doesn't quite understand, which makes sense. They're new. Um, and so they're going to fight. They're going to fight to kind of go back, stay in that infancy stage. And it's on us as parents to praise when you catch them being good and make them feel good about being grown and making the steps and trying. Make sure make your child feel good about trying, not just getting that 100 or getting that A plus, but seeing them study, seeing them make the attempt. It makes such a difference and encourage them to try again. Um, so when I saw my daughter turn about 8, 9 months, and I taught her how to point, I thought to myself, and I taught her how to point in one day, which for the kids I work with who are 2.5 to almost 3 years old, that can take days, some kids weeks, months to master. And I said, okay, if I can get my daughter to do this, can I get someone else's neurotypical child to do this? And I have about 3 or 4 friends who all had kids within a week or two of my daughter. So I reached out to all of them, reached out to all 4 of them and said, hey, is your kid pointing yet? They all said no. I said, okay, do me a favor, try this for the next 2 to 3 days, and I'll get back to you. 3 out of 4 of them told me their kid was pointing the next day. And I said, okay, I'm onto something. The only one who didn't, I would find out months later, actually has severe delays. So I realized this technique helps typical kids, neurotypical kids, kids with autism, kids with delays, depending on the severity, obviously. And I wanted to give parents that blueprint. What I was giving away for free, telling parents at every meeting at my clinic, I realized, well, I'm giving it one-offs. I'm giving one person at a time this information. Parents can use this, and especially with the pandemic babies, because my baby's a pandemic baby. She was born August 2020. My wife was pregnant. She was 3 months pregnant when the world shut down, right? And so a lot of other pandemic babies and parents are noticing their kids are developing a little bit delayed than usual. And part of that is because they weren't exposed to as much community as children typically are. They weren't exposed to much language. They were also exposed to people in a more stressful state, we can say, we can agree. And so that's going to affect their ability to see a full spectrum of human behavior to model. So I really want to make sure any parents who have been curious, like, oh, my kid's 15 months, they're not really saying anything, realize, oh, here's what you can do. I want to give parents that helping hand to just get their kid from A to Z, because I realize I have this knowledge and I've had it for years, and I didn't think that I could also share it with any parent, not just the kids I'm working with, not just kids who have autism, because it works. My job is all evidence based. It provides me exceptional confidence sharing with people, because as long as you're consistent, I told my friends, try for 2 or 3 days. And I said that on purpose so they didn't think if I just try and make my kid point once, it should work and then I'm done. Nothing works that way. Nothing works that way. And I want to help people erase magical thinking and also erase um, poor excuses to give up, because sometimes people will give up and say, I
Mm.
tried, I tried, it just didn't work. I tried to get my kid to play with this toy, it just didn't work. That doesn't matter. Keep trying. Show the kid how to play with the toy. Keep the toy out. Come back to it next week. Same thing with eating, right? In my book, we cover picky eating because so many parents have issues like, how do I get my kids to get over this? They don't want to eat anything but bread and crackers and cheese, which also is neurologically related. That does create kind of an opioid effect. There's a reason for that. Yeah, yeah. It's useful. Everything kids do is useful. They're not just saying I hate greens because they look ugly. Like, no, that actually, like, eating bread and cheese makes us feel good. It's going to release more neurotransmitters. Fun fact to know, right? Kids don't know that, but they know I like this. I'm going to keep doing this. I don't want that. That doesn't that doesn't do it for me, Dad. Pizza is almost always a winner at kids' parties, right? Um, so with picky eating, it's the same thing. There's studies out that show the magic number for picky eating is about 8 to 15. All right. So if a kid doesn't want something, if you offer your child broccoli, they're like, absolutely not. It takes on average for picky eaters, not just your everyday eaters, for specifically picky eating toddlers, it takes 8 to 15 separate exposures to that broccoli before they will try it. They will try it. So I tell parents, don't give up. And a lot of parents don't realize, they don't see the worth in offering a food that a child's rejected 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, so they stop. I say keep going. You don't want to do it every single day in a row, but you can make it a specific day of the week affair. So it could be a Thursday trial. Okay, every Thursday night we're going to put broccoli on the plate, and he doesn't have to eat it, but we're going to put on a plate for the next 2, 3 months. And the only rule I share with parents about this is to not let the child remove it from the plate. They do not have to eat it, but it has to stay on a plate. You got to tell the kid that, and you have to be ready to physically intervene. And that's something else I've noticed that I want to share with parents in this book is physical intervention. A lot of parents, at least in America, are very hands off with correcting their children. They don't know what to do. I've seen parents watch their child attack another child and do nothing. And in my head, I'm like, you're allowed to pick your child up. You can apologize to the other parent, which would be lovely, your child, but you can stop this. You can physically pick your little child up. It's not abuse. There's nothing wrong with it. That's kind of your job. But they freeze. They freeze, and they're not certain what to do, and they let their kids run the show, and it's not safe. That's the thing. I know some people have the mentality where there's a philosophy that's floating around where it's best to just let a child do what they want to do. They know their soul knows what. Yeah, not quite. And my biggest thing. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, I was going to say, do you think it's also that because there are so many, I suppose we hear so much information about being positive and praising that good behavior and not being the corrective parent, not being the one who says no, 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 and then also the societal judgments of physically punishing your child, that you think that by picking up and intervening that people are judging you and that you're doing something wrong as a parent. Do you think that comes into play as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And for any parent who's worried about judgment, I strongly advise not caring. Um, any parent who sees you intervening with child understands. They have been there. Anyone who's not a parent, doesn't matter. I think one of the best quotes that I've heard is, other people's opinions of you is none of your business.
Mm.
And it's really helped me to shed being concerned. When I was younger, in my 20s, I was overly obsessed with what are people thinking about me, or how I'm dressed, or how I'm acting, or how I look. And as I get older, I realized, it doesn't seem to matter, because if I'm thinking about this as much as I am, other people probably think about this as much as I am. And everyone's kind of very, very much self-obsessed in that kind of manner, to the point where it doesn't matter. But ultimately, it's you and your kid. That's how you have to look at it. If you're having interaction with you and your child, all that matters in the world at that moment is you and your child. If you need to help your child learn a better way to be, that's your job, to help your child learn a better way to be. If someone's going to judge you, they're going to judge you regardless. And it's none of your business. There's not much you can do to jump inside someone's brain to paint some Instagram perfect picture of you. You don't need to. It's exhausting. It's not realistic. No one's perfect. Find me a perfect tree. Just be an excellent parent. I tell people, instead of trying to be perfect, try to be great. Start with baseline good. Once you've established you're good, which means that you're functional, you're useful, then aim to be great, which means that you're consistently making progress and your child's making progress. And then from there, aim to be excellent. And at that point, stop. You're good. Plan vacations every now and then. But don't be perfect. Don't be perfect for everyone. Don't be perfect for the person across the train platform who sees your child having a meltdown and they're looking at you. They can look at you. They hear the child screaming. That's what humans will do. They'll look towards loud sounds. But same thing with shame. I know moms more than dads have that mom guilt. Um, and I'd like to take a moment to address that because it can really paralyze some people. And I always invite moms to let this go. And it's easier said than done. I understand, but I invite you to ask the question, who does it help? And that for me has been the method of letting go of my own guilt or shame when I have it. Is who does it help? If you feel mom guilt over, oh, I shouldn't have done this, or what did that person think, or whatever it may be, if you stew on it, you're allowed to feel, obviously. Same with the kids. Everyone's allowed to have your feelings. Um, and then once you shoot it over for a bit, I wouldn't say like for days, right? Don't let it be, or hours even. Recognize that stewing on it isn't helping you unless it's giving you a new plan of what to do next time. And it's not helping your kid. If your partner's involved, it's not helping them. It's just you swimming in this mopey nature that's just basically making the environment less positive. So again, feel how you feel, take a walk, find your way to process so that you can, get out of your own head and refresh yourself. You gotta take a walk, take a shower, work out, read a book, whatever it may be, but make a plan to actually process those feelings as opposed to just coming back to them and just washing yourself in guilt and shame because it's not helping you. That's not helping you. It's not helping your kid. It's not healthy if it's ruminating on too much. And if anything, let it be a signal to recognize and ask yourself, well, what could I have done differently? Yes. And if there's truly nothing you could have done differently, then that's the point when you're allowed to forgive yourself. You are really, really allowed to forgive yourself. And it's so cool. It's so 2022 to forgive yourself. Trust me on this.
Love it. So where can we find your book, Chris?
So my book can be found on Amazon as well as 101behaviorhacks.com. Either site you can order my book. And you can reach me on Instagram. My name is Chris Lake. You can find me Chris Lake IG. You can also find me on Facebook. You can email me at chris@101behaviorhacks.com if you have questions, because I do give parent consultations as well for sticky issues, whether it's picky eating or aggression or how to socialize my kid or communication. In particular, if you have issues with communication, hit me up. I love helping kids go from nonverbal to verbal or barely verbal to more verbal. That's how to find me.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's been an honest pleasure.
And you are so welcome.
I look forward to more of your progress and growth and success. Thank you, Lori.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Relationship Talks. If you can, I would love for you to jump on and leave a review. And whilst you are at it, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please join me again next week when we get to take a look behind closed doors at someone else's relationship. But until then, I am your host, Laurie Brooke, and remember the choice is yours, so make today and the week the very best it can be.